Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Very glad you're with us for the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Good, bad, crazy martinis for you today. And Jim, the race to define Kamala Harris is certainly on. The mainstream media fawning all over her in a number of different ways. But Republicans also have an arsenal of ways to go after Harris for her radical record, many of them from the 2020 campaign trail. That campaign that flamed out might be her biggest hurdle, actually, with all of these clips that are coming out. The first major ad to come out with a lot of them is from Dave McCormick. He's the Republican nominee for Senate in Pennsylvania. He's running against Bob Casey, running for a fourth term there. The incumbent Democrat, Casey is. And so McCormick is not only rolling out Kamala Harris's most radical positions, he's tying Bob Casey to it because Casey went on TV and said everybody should be all excited about Kamala Harris being the Democratic nominee. So here's the ad. It's 90 seconds, but packs a lot of craziness in here.
Kamala Harris is inspiring and very capable. The more people get to know her, they're going to be particularly impressed by her ability.
The nonpartisan GovTrack has rated you as the most liberal senator.
I am prepared to get rid of the filibuster to pass a Green New Deal. There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking.
Would you ban offshore drilling?
Yes.
What is the solution for voters in the fossil fuel industry?
Giving the workers an ability to transition. We're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals. That's correct.
Raise your hand if you think it should be a civil offense rather than a crime across the border without documentation.
Abolish ICE. Yeah. Is that a position you agree with?
And we need to probably think about starting from scratch.
Outdated, it is wrong-headed thinking to think that the only way you're going to get communities to be safe is to put more police officers on the street.
Would you support changing the dietary guidelines?
Yes.
The food pyramid. What would people
Yes.
to reduce red meat specifically?
Yes.
People who are convicted in prison, like the Boston Marathon bombers, on death row, people who are convicted of sexual assault, they should be able to vote.
I think we should have that conversation.
We have to have a buyback program, and I support a mandatory buyback program.
So for people out there who like their insurance, well, they don't get to keep it.
Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
I am opposed to any policy that would deny any human being public health, period.
The more people get to know her, they're going to be particularly impressed by her ability.
So, Jim, a lot to go on there, especially in Pennsylvania with the fracking. I think that's going to go over like a lead balloon for Kamala Harris. But what do you make of the ad? And is this the right strategy? I think it has to be, right?
Oh, definitely. For a while now, I've been telling Democrats, whether or not they wanted my advice or not, that Harris presented the less risky option. That did not mean she was not a risky option. It simply meant that compared to the doddering semi-corpse who's been reanimated out of Rehoboth in Delaware, that she could actually campaign and that would be helpful. What you just saw in that ad from McCormick lays out why she may not be great at campaigning. And it's very weird that you could have somebody who has been vice president for nearly 4 years, now the Democratic nominee. And a lot of people either feel like they don't really know her. They don't feel like they know her well. What we have to go on is the 2020 campaign, which ended before the first contest, and that had, never mind appealing in a swing state like Michigan, Pennsylvania, or Wisconsin, or any of the Sun Belt states. She couldn't do against Democrats. It's Democrats in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. That's a soft crowd. That is not the toughest crowd you're ever going to encounter. And it demonstrated that she had perfected her entire persona, her platform, her worldview, even though it was really a very flexible worldview and could change. But whether I wanted to raise my hand, I misheard the question. I didn't mean to raise my hand, all that kind of stuff. That it was a niche appeal. She was an acquired taste, shall we say. Then she became vice president. And there's been this entire argument earlier today, Politico insisting, well, she never really had the title border czar. Correct. We do not have czars in this country. That's a shorthand. That's a nickname for the position. A person who's in charge of something is what they meant. And oh, by the way, Axios referred to her as the border czar many times, but now they're insisting she was never really the border czar. She was particularly in charge of trying to stem the tide of migrants coming from Central America, and we see how well that worked. So you add all that up, that's actually a pretty weak record. It's a record that's going to be very tough to appeal. And I mentioned this yesterday, and I think I'm probably going to keep coming back to this. I went back and checked. It was November of 2020. I'm sorry, October of 2023, when Elena Plott-Calabro, I'd forgotten, she'd gotten married since then, has a cover piece called "The Kamala Harris Problem." Few people seem to think she's ready to be president. Why? Well, Elena, we have a short podcast, so this it would take us a long time to go through all the reasons. But it's just kind of this observation, like people would say, oh, to make her profile is low, American people don't feel like they know what she's doing. She should go out and give a speech to this group. And then they point out that actually she had. No one noticed, right? Unfortunately, I think some of this is Harris and some of this is a reflection of the modern media environment. If you are Kamala Harris and you go out and you give a standard issue stump speech, abortion is good. We must reform immigration. We need a path to citizenship. Criminals are bad, but we shouldn't be too harsh on them. I was a prosecutor, but I wasn't too harsh a prosecutor. I'm proud of my record, but we shouldn't prosecute people who smoke marijuana. Whatever she goes out and tries to give the standard speech, it doesn't make a splash. Ironically, the only time she makes a speech is when she does some loopy Hallmark card haiku. We are the ones, we have the ones who we have been, kind of thing. Or when she gets into I haven't been to the border and I haven't been to Europe either. That doesn't do particularly well, but that gets attention. That may change. She's a nominee now. People are going to pay a lot more attention to everything that she does. But I think there's a certain irony to this, is that even though Democrats are being so excited at this moment, which, by the way, is really a reflection of how much they did not want to have to go with Biden for, they did not want to have to pretend to be enthused about Biden between now and November. But Harris is a little bit boring. Harris does not, there's an artificial, she's a brat, and you're seeing all this Gen Z slang thrown around about her and stuff like that. But in the end, she's not actually an interesting thinker. She's not provocative. Now, you want to compare this to the other side. Donald Trump says things that are provocative all the time. Donald Trump says things that outrage a huge chunk of the public and that thrill the MAGA grassroots. Almost every single speech. But he gets attention from it. He gets people to lean in. There's people wondering, what is he going to say next? There's not that element with Harris. It'll be interesting to see if she tries to develop this. I think if you're trying to campaign as the candidate of normalcy compared to Trump, that's not the direction you want to go in. She's got to run from her 2020 campaign. She's got to run from the administration's record. And there's the question of okay, then who are you? And how is it you've been vice president for this long? And we, the public, don't really feel like we know you very well. And secondly, that what we do know, we don't particularly like.
No, that's an excellent way to break down where we are right now. And it puts her in a pickle because she's not an original thinker and she can't run on a record. So good luck. I think she's going to try to stay as vague as possible and just simply hammer away at Trump and hope that works. But you also make a good point that if Kamala Harris was a competent, engrossing vice president, she would have been the candidate, or there would have been a big push for her right after the midterms, even if the Democrats didn't do as badly as everybody expected. If they thought she was ready to go, instead of having approval ratings in the low 30s, this would have been a much less chaotic process for the Democrats than trying to pretend Joe Biden was up to the job. By the way, since Biden is alive and is apparently talking tonight, can we finally attack his record tomorrow? I think this whole hagiography that is happening on the Democratic side of the aisle needs a little bit of a rebuttal. I think most people know the truth here. Real quick before we move on, yesterday, the two Democratic leaders on Capitol Hill were all excited in their press conference about Kamala Harris being the presumptive nominee. Chuck Schumer saying that she was chosen from the grassroots up, and I don't know how you possibly make that case, but here's the more curious comment. This is from Hakeem Jeffries trying to explain the difference, the distinction between the candidates in this year's presidential race.
Well, we're looking at a frame of change versus the status quo, moving the country forward versus Donald Trump and extreme MAGA Republicans who want to turn back the clock.
So status quo versus progress. And then Donald Trump wants to go backwards. So I guess he's not the status quo and Harris is, but she's going to be they're making this up as they go along.
I was going to say, yeah, it's a really tough sell that the current vice president is not the status quo.
Right.
I mean, by the way, that also is if that's true, it means that she has not won a single policy argument within the administration since she got there. Right? That's the other way you can interpret that. I will make one minute molecular level defense of Chuck Schumer on that, because I don't think you can say the grassroots. Well, first of all, if you voted for Joe Biden in the 2024 Democratic primary, you were effectively voting to keep Kamala Harris a heartbeat away from the presidency and ready to step in any minute. So I feel like you can make the argument that they were a package deal and that no Democratic primary voter could say, whoa, I voted for Biden, but not for Harris. And the second point where I think you can say the process, and maybe I should be making air quotes as I say process, for the Democrats, it did run out. It was a very short process. And what it was that, word broke out around 1:30, 1:45 on Sunday afternoon. If Gavin Newsom wanted to run, he could have run. If Gretchen Whitmer wanted to run, she could have run. Like anybody, Pete Buttigieg could not have run because he would have had to catch a flight, and all the flights were canceled still on Sunday. Transportation Secretary is an idiot. What's he going to do? But otherwise, none of these people really, there was never even an inkling that they were going to seriously challenge it. So you can't blame Kamala Harris for not having any rivals who are willing to step up. And it's not that I think they all think she's terrific. I think they reasonably concluded, yeah, maybe you could beat her at the convention. I don't think you can then reunite the party and then take on Trump. So I will say that, look, there wasn't much of a process, but there was a process, and also everybody who voted for Biden knew that Harris was in, the most likely substitute if for some reason a guy who turned 82 after the election couldn't run it back.
Going out on a limb here, Jim. I think some conversations might have happened before Biden announced he was leaving. I'm just going out there.
Yeah, no doubt. But
3.5 weeks. Yeah. I'm guessing they had this all pretty much orchestrated.
They may have all woken up with horses' heads in their beds Monday morning. Gotta say, don't even think about it. But welcome to Democratic politics.
Well, welcome to a better diet. That's what Lumen brings with the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism just through breathing. It's literally that easy. Breathing. You wake up in the morning, you take a deep breath, you breathe into your Lumen, and it tells you what's happening with your metabolism right then. Are you burning fat? Are you burning carbs? What else is going on? Then it gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management.
Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food that you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and even better sleep.
So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/3ml to get 15% off your Lumen. That is lumen.me/3ml for 15% off your purchase. Again, that's lumen.me/3ml. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. And during the hearing with then Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle on Monday, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer of Kentucky, wanted to know a little bit more about what the FBI knew in the investigation. And one of his asides was, some of us don't have a lot of confidence in the FBI right now. And the same goes for the Justice Department. And we keep hearing, well, why is that? Why does the right not have confidence? It's stories like this from Politico. Headline, Feds discover transcripts of Biden chats with biographer. Josh Gerstein and Kyle Cheney on the story. The Justice Department told a federal judge late Monday, so about 24 hours after Biden says he's not going to be a candidate, that it has located transcripts it previously denied having of President Joe Biden's talks with a biographer that played a role in the recently completed criminal investigation into Biden's handling of classified material before he became president. In the wake of a report special counsel Robert Hurr issued in February that described Biden as a, quote, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, unquote, the Justice Department has been swamped with Freedom of Information Act requests and lawsuits demanding access to various records related to Hurr's probe. So, Jim, you don't have to be much of a cynic to see that, oh, Biden's not running? Oh, look, the transcripts were there all the time. We might even get the audio by the end of the year, Jim. Who knows?
Greg, when it comes to the FBI, are we asking for miracles?
No.
For all That's for Tevi and all of our diehard friends out there. There's a little detail in this report that jumped out at me, where it says, DOJ lawyers handling one Freedom of Information case told U.S. District Judge Dabney Friedrich it would be highly time-consuming to process other audio files containing Biden's interviews with writer Mark Zwanitzer. The attorney said those recordings were stretched for 70 hours, and reviewing audio for potential classified material is far more difficult than written material. There's software that'll do that. These guys know about that, right?
Yes.
Like how many times on your phone have you been like, oh, I got to send a text, boop, you press a little what, and it gets pretty good at recognizing your voice and not making it sound like, all that kind of stuff. So like you could do, like YouTube does automatic transcriptions. Like they're transcriptions. We gotta etch this out on stone tablets. So it takes 70 hours. The transcription software isn't going to be perfect, but it'll be close enough. And if you're looking for classified, if you're there's certain words like Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, Putin. There's certain words you can look through and see if you can find. So my guess is, would it involve some work? Sure. But I can't believe, here's a Freedom of Information request, and the response from the Department of Justice is, it's too hard. It would take too long. I haven't seen a performance like this since Luke Skywalker said he wanted to go to the Taji station. I wanted to get some power converters. It's so hard to it's a Freedom of Information. It's the president talking to you. The question, did he talk about classified information? Seems like kind of a big deal here. And they talk about, it was too hard to check. So anyway, and yes, of course, the timing of this right after Biden says, oh, hey, I'm not running for re-election. It is, there's a reason people are cynical about this. And it's very hard to believe that there is not one standard when the Department of Justice really wants to get somebody, and another standard when they're like, this is a guy, he's an old man, lay off on him. He can't remember anything anyway. So which I still can't believe that was like the excuse. The president can't, has been classified with CRS. Can't remember stuff.
Right. You'd think they'd space it out a little bit and not make it quite so obvious. But nonetheless, DOJ, you're not helping your reputation. Just going to say, not sure you care, but I'm just going to give you that little bit of advice. But hey, if you're one of the people that filed the FOIA request and all of a sudden the DOJ has got it, I can understand if you want to have an adult beverage or two out of your frustration for not getting it over the past 5 months. Take Z-Biotics first. It will make sure that you have a better morning than you otherwise would have the next day.
Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut, and it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that is to blame for your rough next morning. Z-Biotics produces an enzyme that breaks this byproduct down. So if you just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, as always, and then you will feel your best the next morning.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I'm not much of a drinker, but one of my colleagues here said, oh, what's this Z-Biotic stuff? And so I explained it to him, and he says, as I've gotten older, I've noticed that my normal limits, I still feel it the next morning now. And so he tried Z-Biotics. Feels much, much better, and so it definitely does the job. Go to zbiotics.com/3ml to get 15% off your first order when you use 3ml at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantees, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Visit zbiotics.com/3ml and use the code 3ml at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, Z-Biotics, for sponsoring this episode and our good times. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And I mentioned the Secret Service in passing there in the second martini, but the Secret Service is back in the news today. Not just because of Kimberly Cheadle's resignation, but because of a request they're making to the Trump campaign after the debacle of how they planned for and executed security on July 13th at the rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, where President Trump came within probably less than an inch of being killed by a would-be assassin. And Corey Comparator, of course, was killed and 2 others severely injured. And so you could get better at your job, or you can do this. This is the Fox News report last night on Special Report with Brett Baer.
And just breaking moments ago, Brett, I want to tell you that the Secret Service is apparently now telling or asking the Trump campaign to stop doing their rallies outdoors. This is reporting from the Washington Post, just breaking in the last couple of minutes here. I can tell you that I asked Don Jr. about that at the RNC last week, if he was going to encourage his father to stop holding rallies outdoors. He said that his father would not like that at all. He loves those outdoor rallies. So we're still trying to work this story right now, but that's coming from the Washington Post. The Secret Service is now encouraging the Trump campaign to stop doing those outdoor rallies.
Yeah, Trump supporters now frustrated because if this were to happen, it limits the size of his rallies. Arenas can hold a lot of people, but some of these outdoor rallies get even bigger. And so, Jim, now you got a standoff, I guess, between a Secret Service who I guess doesn't feel confident that can protect the guy in an outdoor venue and a president who wants to keep doing it. So what do you make of all this?
About the only silver lining to this, Greg, is that they're not saying to Trump, don't worry, we've got this, when they don't got this. And I suppose that would be worse. Better to be upfront about your limitations and protecting the president in an open air environment than to pretend that it's okay and go forward with it, which is apparently what the Secret Service was doing heading into the event in Pennsylvania. But I think it's also a rather unnerving admission on the part of the Secret Service to say, yeah, we just can't can't guarantee your safety. We're just not good enough. We're just not now. Is a open air environment tougher than a closed environment? Sure. Actually, I was thinking one of the things that I was kind of surprised by, because you hear about the shooter apparently was using a drone to fly over and get a better view of it. How do we know that some particular devious force might want to use drones to attack a president or a presidential candidate speaking in an open air environment? And lots of them. One of the Gerard Butler Secret Service movies. I think it was Angel Has Fallen. Something has fallen. White House has fallen. Biden has fallen. Grandma has fallen. One of those fallen movies in which they just attack lots and lots of drones. And that, ends up killing lots of people and all that stuff. So, an unnerving possibility there. And I think a concession to reality. I think I'd rather see Trump give speeches in indoor venues than to press the luck and do it again and hope that, the next shooter has similarly flawed aim. But I think it is a black eye for the Secret Service. It's an embarrassing concession that they can't protect this anymore. We'll see how this shakes out. I don't think this is going to make a significant difference in terms of the effectiveness of the Trump campaign or something. But I think it's a demonstration that the Secret Service, which is used to having these great heroic movies made about them, is not living up to that image or that reputation. And this deserves every bit of the bipartisan condemnation that it has gotten so far.
No doubt about it. And you and I are no strangers to reporting on government incompetence at different levels. But it's one thing if bureaucrats are, hiding the truth or something like that, as opposed to an institution like the Secret Service that really does need to be at an elite level, really does need to be competent. And until recently, had that reputation. It's hard to think of an agency that was as well thought of that its reputation plummeted so far so fast, and deservedly so.
Hey, the week finally slowed down, Greg.
Yeah, a little bit. We'll see what Joe has to say tonight, and after that, I'm guessing they're going to mothball him for the most part for the next 6 months, and see where the campaign goes from here. But
President Biden's farewell address. He may not know it yet, but it is.
It very well could be. Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Wednesday, and join us again on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.